Welcome to the Laboratory of Bad Ideas. Today's experiment, testing the limits of human judgment against the unyielding laws of physics. The results, as always, are conclusive and messy. We're not just telling stories, we're publishing the field notes on terminal stupidity. Lab safety notice. These are real case studies with fatal outcomes. Do not attempt to replicate these experiments. 1. The story of the siphoning duo, who created a legendary unsanitary explosion, is a masterpiece of teamwork gone wrong. A cautionary tale that proves that when you mix petty crime, bad aim, and a really good joke, the results are often explosive. Our scene is a hot, humid night in Washington state. Our heroes, let's call them Dale and Earl, were a pair of buddies with a shared problem. Their truck was out of gas and their wallets were out of cash. But they had a plan. A brilliant, if morally questionable, plan. They spotted a large, beautiful RV parked down the street, a veritable land yacht that, to them, looked like a rolling gas station just waiting to be tapped. Their mission? To siphon a few gallons and be on their way. Dale, the self-proclaimed brains of the operation, came prepared with a length of rubber hose. He snuck over to the RV, with Earl acting as a very giggly, very unhelpful lookout. Dale confidently located what he assumed was the fuel cap, unscrewed it, and with the swagger of a seasoned criminal, he shoved the hose in. He put the other end in his mouth, ready to take that first, disgusting pull to get the flow started. He closed his eyes, expecting the acrid, chemical taste of gasoline. What he got instead was something from the ninth circle of hell. It was a taste so foul, so profoundly, biblically awful, that his brain probably blue-screened for a second. He had not, in fact, stuck the hose into the fuel tank. He had, with a level of bad luck that is almost poetic, stuck it directly into the RV's sewage holding tank. He had a mouthful of raw, concentrated, chemical-laced black water. In a violent, convulsive spasm of pure revulsion, he spat everything out onto the pavement, creating a foul, shimmering puddle. He was probably gagging, screaming, trying to scrape the taste off his tongue with his own hand. His friend Earl, who had been nervously watching, saw the whole thing, and he lost it. He started laughing. Not just a little chuckle. This was a deep, soul-shaking, can't-breathe kind of laugh. The kind of laugh that only comes from watching your best friend get a mouthful of RV sewage. He was doubled over, tears streaming down his face, completely incapacitated by the sheer, beautiful stupidity of the moment. Dale was probably screaming at him, "It's not funny, Earl," which only made Earl laugh harder. But in his moment of hysterical glee, Earl, who had been smoking a cigarette, completely forgot he was holding it. As he doubled over, wheezing with laughter, the lit cigarette slipped from his fingers. It fell in a perfect, slow-motion arc, a tiny orange ember on a one-way trip to destiny. It landed with a gentle hiss directly in the puddle at Dale's feet. A puddle that, due to all the fumbling, now contained a lovely mix of raw sewage and a significant amount of spilled gasoline. The gasoline vapors, which had been patiently waiting, ignited instantly. The resulting explosion wasn't just big, it was legendary. A massive, unsanitary fireball that probably smelled as bad as it looked, engulfing both men in a wave of fire and shame. It was a perfect and perfectly disgusting storm of bad decisions. 2. The painter who decided to use a freight train as a mobile scaffolding platform is a story that should be taught in engineering schools as a perfect example of what happens when creative problem-solving goes completely off the rails. Our story takes us to a small house in Ukraine, a house with a very unique, and as it turns out, very dangerous feature. It was built right next to a busy set of freight train tracks. Our protagonist, a proud homeowner named Victor, decided it was time to give his garage a fresh coat of paint. He was a classic DIY guy, a man who believed that with enough ingenuity, any problem could be solved without calling a professional. He was doing a great job, but he ran into a common problem. He couldn't reach the high spots under the eaves. His ladder was just a little too short. He tried stretching, he tried standing on his toes, but it was no use. He needed a better platform. And then he heard it. The familiar, rhythmic clatter of an approaching freight train. It was moving slowly, as they often did on this particular stretch of track. And as he watched the long, flat side of a freight car glide past his garage, a bolt of pure, unadulterated, and catastrophically bad genius struck him. He looked at his ladder. He looked at the slow-moving train. He realized he didn't need a taller ladder. The train was his ladder. It was a moving wall, a perfect mobile platform to rest his ladder against. In his mind, it was brilliant. The train was moving so slowly, he'd have plenty of time to finish the last few spots before it passed. So he put his plan into action. He waited for a long, flat-sided car to approach, and with the confidence of a man who is about to make a huge mistake, he leaned his metal ladder against its moving side. The metallic scrape of the ladder against the train car was probably deafening. For a moment, it worked. The ladder was stable, held in place by the train's slow, steady momentum. He scrambled up, paint can in one hand, brush in the other, and began to paint. He was a genius. He was painting his garage from a moving train. He was probably so proud of his own cleverness, so lost in his moment of DIY triumph, that he didn't notice the subtle change in the rhythm of the tracks. The train, having cleared the slow section, was beginning to pick up speed. The slow, gentle crawl was becoming a steady, powerful rumble. The section of wall he was using as his scaffolding was now moving faster. The ladder, still leaning against it, began to be pulled along with the train. Victor, perched at the top, probably felt a sudden, terrifying lurch. His brilliant, stable platform was now an out-of-control, accelerating chariot of doom, dragging him and his ladder away from his garage and down the tracks. He clung on for dear life, the wind whistling in his ears, his paintbrush probably still held in a death grip. The train continued to accelerate, its immense power and momentum completely indifferent to the small, screaming man it had accidentally picked up. His wild ride came to a sudden final end when the train passed a signal post, the ladder striking it with incredible force and sending him flying. His quest for a perfectly painted garage was over. He had tried to harness the power of a freight train for a simple household chore, and the train had simply and efficiently taken him along for the ride. 3. The story of the man who tried to fight a laser with his face and ended up losing to a garbage truck is a beautiful, intricate ballet of bad decisions, a perfect example of how one small, stupid act can trigger a catastrophic and entirely unrelated chain reaction. Our story begins in a quiet suburban backyard. Our protagonist, a man with a brand new, incredibly powerful green laser pointer and a severe lack of judgment, was bored. He decided to entertain himself by playing a little game. He was tagging airplanes as they flew high overhead on their final approach to the local airport. He probably thought it was hilarious, watching the tiny, powerful green dot dance across the fuselage of a 747, feeling a sense of godlike power. He wasn't trying to cause a disaster. He was just being a moron, completely unaware that shining a laser at an aircraft is a major federal crime and can temporarily blind the pilots. One of the pilots, his cockpit suddenly flooded with a blinding green light, was not amused. He did exactly what he was trained to do. He immediately radioed air traffic control, who, using the plane's advanced navigation systems, were able to pinpoint the exact location of the laser source with terrifying accuracy. The police were dispatched immediately. Back in his yard, our hero was still giggling to himself, tracking another plane, when he heard the faint, distant sound of sirens. The sirens got louder, closer. A cold, dawning horror probably washed over him as he realized the sirens were for him. The game was over. Panic took over. His brain went into pure flight-or-fight mode, and he chose flight. He needed to escape. He looked around his yard and saw his only way out, the tall wooden fence at the back of his property. He didn't know what was on the other side, and he didn't care. He just knew it was away from the approaching police cars. He made a mad dash for the fence, the laser pointer probably still clutched in his hand, and with a surge of adrenaline, he vaulted over it, landing in the alleyway behind his house. He probably felt a moment of relief. He had made it. He had escaped. But in his panicked, one-track-minded escape from the police, he had failed to consider his new surroundings. The alleyway behind his house was not a quiet, empty escape route. It was the designated route for the neighborhood's garbage truck, which was, at that exact moment, making its weekly rounds. He landed on the other side of the fence and ran directly into the path of the massive, grinding, and utterly unstoppable vehicle. The driver never even saw him. Our hero had been so terrified of getting arrested for playing with a laser pointer that he had chosen an escape route that led directly to a much more permanent and much smellier conclusion. The police arrived just moments later to a scene that was both tragic and deeply, deeply ironic. They had come to arrest a man for a federal crime and ended up investigating a fatal accident that he had caused all by himself. 4. The story of the man who lost a firefight with his television set is a dark, comedic tale from the paranoid fringes of society. A story that proves sometimes your greatest enemy isn't the government. It's your own reflection in a darkened screen. Our protagonist was a man who saw conspiracies everywhere. The mailman was a spy. The squirrels were government drones. And his television set, his old, bulky cathode ray tube TV, was the primary surveillance device, a two-way portal through which shadowy government agents were monitoring his every move. He saw their eyes in the static, heard their whispers in the hum of the electronics. He had had enough. He decided it was time to fight back, to end the surveillance, to liberate himself from the electronic eye in his living room. His plan was not to unplug it or to cover it with a blanket. His plan was a classic, all-American solution, a 12-gauge shotgun. He believed that a well-aimed blast of buckshot would not just destroy the TV, but would send a powerful, fiery message back to his invisible tormentors. So, one evening, he stood in the middle of his living room, shotgun in hand, facing down his sworn enemy. He probably felt like a revolutionary, a lone warrior standing up to a dystopian regime. He aimed the shotgun squarely at the center of the dark, silent screen and, from point-blank range, he pulled the trigger. The blast was deafening in the small, enclosed space. The screen of the TV exploded in a shower of glass and sparks. For a split second, he must have felt a surge of pure, triumphant victory. He had done it. He had blinded the eye. But his celebration was cut tragically and ironically short. What our paranoid hero failed to appreciate was the robust, over-engineered construction of old television sets. They were built like tanks. The buckshot had easily pierced the thin glass screen, but it then collided with the solid, heavy steel frame that housed the cathode ray tube inside. And this is where the laws of physics decided to deliver a brutal and very personal rebuttal to his conspiracy theory. The lead pellets, instead of embedding themselves in the electronics, ricocheted. One of those pellets, traveling at an incredible speed, bounced off the steel frame at a perfect geometric angle and flew straight back at the shooter. It struck him in the chest with lethal force. He collapsed to the floor, a victim not of a government conspiracy, but of his own poorly planned act of technological rebellion. The TV, although mortally wounded, had won the duel. When the police arrived, they found a bizarre scene. A man, a shotgun, and a smoldering, shattered television set that had, in its final moments, successfully defended itself. It's a powerful lesson that sometimes the call is not coming from inside the house. The call is coming from inside your own head. 5. The hunting trip. Where the biggest game was the other hunter is a grim and profoundly stupid story from the dark plains of Zimbabwe. A cautionary tale that proves the most dangerous animal in the bush is often the one holding the other gun. Our story features two poachers, a pair of partners in crime, united by a shared disdain for wildlife conservation and a powerful desire for quick cash. On this particular moonless night, they were out hunting, illegally, of course, for anything they could sell. Their method was simple. One of them, let's call him Thabo, would act as the beater, crawling low through the tall, dry grass on his hands and knees, making noise to flush out any hidden animals. The other, Juma, would wait at a distance, rifle ready, to pick off whatever came running his way. It was a system they had probably used before, a risky but effective partnership. As Thabo was crawling through the brush, rustling and grunting to mimic the sound of a foraging animal, he was doing his job a little too well. Juma, peering through his rifle scope from 100 yards away, saw movement in the grass. In the darkness, through the distorted lens of his cheap scope, he saw a dark, hairy shape, low to the ground, snuffling and moving just like a large warthog. His heart probably started to pound with excitement. A big warthog meant a big payday. He didn't wait to confirm. He didn't call out to his partner. He was a poacher, not a sportsman. He took aim at the center of the dark mass, held his breath, and squeezed the trigger. The crack of the rifle shot echoed across the silent savannah. He saw the shape in his scope collapse and fall still. A perfect shot. He probably felt a surge of pride in his marksmanship. He lowered his rifle and began to walk towards his prize, already counting the money in his head. But as he got closer, a cold, sickening feeling of dread began to creep over him. The shape on the ground wasn't a warthog. It was his friend, Thabo, lying motionless in a pool of blood. He had been so convincing in his impression of a wild pig that he had successfully fooled the one person he shouldn't have. It was a simple, tragic, and entirely avoidable case of mistaken identity. Juma was left alone in the darkness, a poacher who had just become a killer, his partner the victim of his own terrible acting skills. It's a dark reminder that when you're hunting in the dark, you should probably be very, very sure of what you're shooting at, especially when your target grunts and crawls just like your best friend. 6. The ostrich that was a better security guard than a guard dog is a story that comes to us from South Africa, a place where the local fauna can be a little more aggressive than your average squirrel. Our story begins with a burglar, a man who thought he had found the perfect easy target, a quiet, upscale house in a nice neighborhood. He cased the joint, waited for the homeowners to leave, and, under the cover of darkness, he broke in. He was in. The adrenaline was pumping. He was ready to make off with the usual haul, electronics, jewelry, cash. But as he was creeping through the house, he was confronted. Not by a homeowner, not by a blaring alarm. He was confronted by the family pet, and this was not a yapping poodle or a sleepy old cat. The pet was a full-grown, 200-pound, 7-foot-tall ostrich, which had been quietly roaming the house as its personal domain. The burglar probably froze for a second, his brain struggling to process the surreal sight of a giant, prehistoric-looking bird staring him down in the middle of a living room. Then, he probably started to laugh. An ostrich as a guard animal? It was absurd. It was hilarious. He saw not a threat, but a joke. He tried to shoo it away, probably waving his hands and saying something like, "Get out of here, you big dumb bird!" He had made a critical and fatal error. He had mistaken looks goofy for is harmless. Ostriches are not just big, silly-looking birds. They are notoriously territorial, fiercely aggressive, and equipped with a kick so powerful it can disembowel a lion. The ostrich, seeing this strange intruder in its house, did not see a joke. It saw a threat. It responded not with fear, but with pure, unadulterated reptilian fury. Before the burglar could even react, the ostrich took a step forward and delivered a single, devastatingly powerful kick directly to his chest. The force of the blow was immense, a battering ram of bone and muscle. It ruptured the burglar's heart and probably broke several ribs. He collapsed to the floor, dead before he even hit the ground. He had broken into a house, expecting to face a challenge, but he never expected that challenge to be a 200-pound bird with a chip on its shoulder. The homeowners returned later to a very confusing scene. A dead burglar on their living room floor and a very proud, very territorial ostrich standing guard over the body. It's a powerful lesson for all aspiring criminals. Always check for pets, and never, ever underestimate a bird that can run 40 miles an hour and kill you with a single kick. 7. The man who became a permanent part of the salt of the earth is a story about a workplace problem, a simple solution, and a catastrophic, crushing failure to understand the nature of the material you're working with. Our scene is a massive salt processing plant in the United States, a place of towering silos and mountains of glistening white salt. Our protagonist, a worker at the plant, was given a routine, if slightly annoying, task. At the bottom of one of the giant silos, a massive, solidified block of salt had formed, hard as a rock, preventing the silo from emptying properly. His job was to break it up. His tool for the job was a heavy-duty, pneumatic jackhammer. His method, however, was where things took a turn for the worse. Instead of trying to break up the block from a safe position, he decided on a more direct, hands-on approach. He would be lowered into the silo on a harness, and he would attack the solidified block from directly on top of it. He probably thought it was the most efficient way to get the job done. So he was lowered down into the vast, echoing silence of the salt silo. He landed on the massive, solid block at the bottom and got to work. He fired up the pneumatic jackhammer, its powerful, deafening rat-a-tat-tat shattering the quiet. The vibrations from the jackhammer were immense, shaking the entire silo. The block of salt beneath his feet began to crack and crumble. His plan was working. He was a master of his craft, a lone warrior battling a mountain of mineral. But he had forgotten about the walls. The silo wasn't empty. The walls were still coated with thousands of tons of loose, granular salt, clinging to the sides at a steep, precarious angle. The powerful, rhythmic vibrations from his jackhammer, which were so effective at breaking up the block below him, were also traveling up the walls of the silo. And those vibrations were just what the massive, unstable cliffs of salt needed to let go. With a low, rumbling groan, a massive salt avalanche began. The salt on the walls broke free and began to pour down from all sides, a silent, white, all-consuming waterfall. He probably looked up from his work just in time to see the tidal wave of salt descending upon him. He had no time to react, nowhere to run. He was instantly buried under several tons of the very product he was supposed to be processing. He had gone into the silo to break up a block of salt and had ended up becoming a permanent and very well-seasoned part of the landscape. 8. The story of the man who tried to fight a rock with science and lost to a geological guillotine is a powerful testament to the fact that just because a technique is old doesn't mean it's safe, especially when you're standing in the blast radius. Our story unfolds on a rugged piece of land in rural India. Our protagonist, a man trying to clear his property for farming, had encountered an obstacle, a big one. A massive, stubborn, multi-ton boulder, a granite behemoth that had probably been sitting there since the last ice age, was right in the middle of his future cornfield. And it had to go. He didn't have access to modern explosives or heavy machinery. But he was a resourceful man, a man who remembered the old ways. He recalled an ancient, almost forgotten technique for breaking rocks, a method that used the power of thermal shock. The plan was as elegant as it was dangerous. He would build a massive, raging bonfire around the base of the boulder, heating it for several hours to an extreme temperature, causing the rock to expand. Then, he would suddenly douse it with cold water. The rapid, violent contraction, he theorized, would cause the rock to crack and shatter. It was a beautiful, primal application of physics. So he spent the better part of a day gathering wood, creating a massive, funeral pyre-like structure around the boulder. He lit the fire, and it roared to life, a towering inferno that licked at the ancient granite. For hours, he tended the fire, feeding it more and more wood, the boulder hissing and popping in the intense heat. He was a patient man, a geological chef, slow-cooking his stony adversary. Finally, after the rock was glowing with a dull, cherry-red heat, he decided it was time for the grand finale. He had several large barrels of cold water ready. He grabbed a bucket, and with a feeling of triumphant anticipation, he hurled the cold water onto the superheated rock. And it worked. It worked a little too well. The thermal shock was not gentle. The boulder didn't just crack, it exploded. With a deafening boom that echoed through the valley, the massive granite rock fractured with the force of a bomb, sending a deadly storm of razor-sharp stone shrapnel in every direction. Our hero, who was standing a mere 50 feet away, admiring his handiwork, had made one final, fatal miscalculation. He had failed to account for the sheer, explosive power he was unleashing. A massive 100-pound shard of granite, sharp as an axe head, was launched from the explosion, flying through the air like a prehistoric missile. It traveled the 50 feet in a fraction of a second and decapitated him instantly. He had successfully broken the boulder. He had cleared his land. But in his quest to conquer a rock, he had been defeated by a piece of it, a victim of his own, tragically successful science experiment. 9. The driver who tried to get a better view and ended up with a very clear, very final perspective is a story that comes from the heart of a blinding snowstorm. A cautionary tale that proves sometimes the safest place to be is inside your car, even if you can't see a thing. Our scene is a desolate, snow-swept highway somewhere in the frozen north. A blizzard was raging, a whiteout of epic proportions, reducing visibility to almost zero. Our protagonist was a driver, bravely, or perhaps foolishly, navigating the treacherous conditions. The snow was coming down so thick and fast, his windshield wipers were fighting a losing battle, just smearing the wet, heavy snow across the glass. Frustrated and half-blind, he decided he needed a better view. He needed to see the road. And he had an idea. A simple, direct, and catastrophically bad idea. He decided he could see better if he just stuck his head out of the driver's side window. In his mind, this would allow him to bypass the blurry windshield and get a clear, unobstructed view of the road ahead so he could stay in his lane. So, he rolled down the window, the freezing, biting wind and snow immediately blasting him in the face, and stuck his head out. For a moment, it probably worked. He could see the faint yellow line on the road, a reassuring guide in the white chaos. He was a genius, a master of winter driving. He continued on, his head in the blizzard, his body warm in the car, feeling like he had outsmarted the storm. But in his laser focus on the road directly in front of his car, he failed to see the much larger, much wider picture. He didn't see the massive yellow snowplow that was approaching in the oncoming lane. The plow was doing its job. Its massive, 10-foot wide steel blade extended to clear not just the lane, but the shoulder of the road as well. The driver of the plow, sitting high in his cab, probably saw the faint headlights of an approaching car, but he would never have expected a human head to be sticking out of it, directly in the path of his extended blade. The two vehicles passed each other in a swirling vortex of snow. Our hero never saw it coming. The massive, unyielding steel blade of the snowplow, moving at a combined speed of probably 60 miles per hour, made contact with his head. The road was cleared. Very, very efficiently. He had been so determined to get a better view of the road that he had failed to see the one thing on it that mattered. His quest for a clearer perspective had ended with him getting a final, brutal, and very, very close-up look at a piece of heavy machinery. 10. The man who tried to cross a frozen river like Tarzan and ended up as a human pendulum is a story that comes to us from the cold, icy heart of a Russian winter, a beautiful and brutal illustration of the principle of conservation of energy. Our hero, a man whose spirit of adventure was clearly not dampened by the freezing temperatures, was faced with a challenge. He needed to get to the other side of a wide, frozen river. The ice was too thin to walk on, but there was a sturdy bridge overhead. The logical solution would be to simply walk across the bridge. But our hero was not a logical man. He was a man of style, a man of flair. He saw a thick rope hanging from the side of the bridge, probably left there by utility workers, and a brilliant athletic idea was born. He was going to cross the river by swinging on the rope, like a modern-day, vodka-fueled Tarzan. He gathered his friends to watch his glorious feat of acrobatic prowess. He grabbed the rope, took a running start, and launched himself off the riverbank, a graceful, soaring arc of pure, unadulterated confidence. His momentum carried him forward, out over the frozen expanse. He was flying. He probably let out a triumphant yell, the sound echoing in the cold, still air. His plan was working perfectly. He was going to swing to the other side, let go, and land like a champion. But as he reached the apex of his swing, directly over the middle of the river, he made one small but critical error. He failed to let go of the rope. Maybe he was so caught up in the thrill of the moment, maybe his hands were frozen to the rope, we'll never know. But he held on. And this is where a man named Sir Isaac Newton decided to join the conversation. The law of the pendulum took over. His forward momentum was exhausted, and now gravity began to pull him back the way he had come. He swung back, a human pendulum, gathering speed, a helpless passenger on a ride he could no longer control. He probably watched in dawning, wide-eyed horror as the concrete bridge abutment, the very same one he had so bravely leapt from just moments before, rushed up to meet him. He slammed into the solid, unyielding concrete with a sickening final thud. He had started his journey with a glorious forward leap, but had ended it with a brutal backward crash. He had successfully crossed half the river twice, but had ultimately ended up exactly where he started, just in a much, much worse condition. You've seen our collection. Now you're the talent scout. What's the single dumbest, most bafflingly dangerous thing you've ever personally witnessed? Give us the story in the comments. Anonymously, of course. Your nomination might make the next video. If you support this research, a like is appreciated. Subscribe to see the next batch of candidates.